Hello everyone, it's Joe here from Draft FPL. Welcome back to another video. Today we are looking at my top 5 picks for Draft FPL from my current rankings for the 24-25 season. Let's get into it. So today we're looking at the current top 5 from my rankings. If you want to see the full ranking list, check out the Patreon. The link is in the description down below. We've not just got rankings, we've got all sorts, player profiles, transfers, promoted team roundup, and there's plenty more coming before the season starts, and advice throughout the whole season to keep your season on track. So yeah, definitely have a look at that in the link in the description. If you're not interested in that, that's absolutely fine. My full rankings will be coming to the general public before the season starts, but if you've got quite an early draft, you might want to sign up to avoid disappointment. Looking at the picks today then, first up, rank number 1 in every single person's draft. He's on the thumbnail, he's on the title card, is Haaland, of course. His per 90 data from last season is very, very strong. He did miss a period of the season through injury, and that does kind of show in his overall points, but the per 90 data is incredibly strong. 7.64 points per 90 from an expected points of 7.52, and that figure comes from his expected goals, expected assists, and what bonus he would and appearance points he would score based on the expected data. So I think that's a really valuable metric, expected points. 7.52 expected points realised into 7.64 points overall is very, very strong. He underperformed on his XG slightly, XG of 1.04 per 90 with return of 0.95 goals per 90 is very good. You might think that Haaland is like one of these unbelievable finishers that overperforms his XG all the time, but he's actually not. He pretty much performs to XG for the most part, as many players do, to be honest. So that figure is really, really important when trying to assess his performance, and that is very strong. Expected assists of 0.08, and he actually picked up 0.28 per 90 assists, so he did overperform a little bit there, but the goals are the main thing for Haaland. And for me, the bonus points change helps him as well, because he does win a fair few fouls and he has a load of shots on target. So he's an absolute monster. He was already picked number 1. The BPS changes make him even stronger. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that he'll go pick number 1 in the vast majority of drafts. Not only that, he's also a forward, which helps with the composition of the rest of your team. So there's absolutely no more discussion needed. On to pick number 2, and I must admit, in my current rankings that are available on the Patreon, this is not my pick number 2. As of this morning, I decided to swap number 2 and number 3. So you'll see that number 3 shortly, but this pick was number 3, and that is Mo Salah. He has moved up to number 2. I moved him down a little bit just because of all the talks of Saudi, and there's a new system in play, new manager. We don't know how Liverpool are going to perform, but the more I think about it, the more I look at his season history, the data, it doesn't look like he's moving now. I don't think there's really any chance he goes this summer. It just seems like such a risk not to take him. I still think he's going to be by a long way the main goal threat for Liverpool. I still think they have a decent time of it. They'll be in and amongst the top 4. They're going to be playing attacking football. I think it's foolish to sort of overplay how big the change will be under Slot. I don't think Liverpool are going to have a massive drop off. There might be a little bit of time at the start of the season where they're adjusting, but Salah can pick up the points no matter how bad the performances are, as we've seen. Even in Liverpool's bad years, Salah's still been an amazing pick. The per 90 data from last season is actually incredible. A lot of people would think he had a bad year last year, and he kind of did in terms of total points, but mainly that was just down to AFCON and the injury he suffered towards the end of AFCON and the reduced minutes. When you see at the end of the video, I've got a table that shows all the top 5 picks in this stats like side by side, and you'll see actually that the data is very strong. Points per 90 are 7.49, expected points are 7.46, really strong. 0.64 goals per game from an XG of 0.74. That's the only thing that is maybe worrying for some people. You might think, well, he's not scoring, he's not converting as many of the chances as he used to. Well, actually, that is true, but only by a little bit, and it's not a massive sample size one season, so it could just be a bit of variance at play there, and we see next season he's back to sort of performing as his XG sort of would indicate. And he's on penalties, he's going to play every single game, there's no doubt about that. There's no real competition for him on the right wing for Liverpool. I think Diaz and Jota are both much better from the left. Darwin's better from the left if he goes out wide. The only real player that can play on the right is Harvey Elliott, or maybe Szoboszlai, but the way that Slot plays, he wants fast and tricky wingers. I think it's going to be Salah all day, every day. He did actually rack up a few more assists last season than he has in the past, but I think that might just be a little bit of variance at play. His expected assists of 0.27 is similar to what we've seen in previous seasons, although he did create a lot more chances. So maybe he is, upping those creative numbers a little bit, and I think we might see a little bit more of that this season. The way that Klopp used to like to set up attacks was that the midfielders didn't really bomb into the box, and it was down to the wingers to come inside and the fullbacks to hold the width. But it does look like Slot likes to overload the box a little bit more with runners from central areas, whether that's from the striker dropping deep and then returning into the box, or whether it's from a number 10 joining the action, someone like Szoboszlai maybe. We might see a little bit more flooding of the box under Slot, which could help Salah create more chances. It could see him shoot less often, although to be honest, he shoots at every opportunity no matter where his teammates are anyway, so I don't think it will have too much of an impact. Moving on to number 3 then, and as I said, this was my number 2 as of literally today. I've swapped this over, and that is Bukayo Saka. I think for me, he's ahead of everybody else just because of consistency, minutes, penalties for the most part. I think he's just Mr. Consistent for Arsenal. He's the one that all the attacks go through, and the per 90 data is not as strong as others on this list, especially when we look at XG 0.47 compared to like Salah and Haaland close to 1, and XA 0.33 is pretty good actually, but he plays so many minutes, he never gets injured, he's always available, and Arteta really doesn't like to rest him if he can avoid it. We did see him come off early a little bit more last season than we had in the season before, and I think that might continue, especially if Arsenal add another winger or another forward to their current complement. So we may see Saka rested a little bit more than previous seasons, but honestly, I think he'll start maybe 35 games in the Premier League at least, barring some kind of freak injury, and that kind of consistency plus penalties plus open play threat plus being the player that everything goes through for one of the best teams in the league just adds up to an absolutely fantastic fantasy prospect. So yeah, I did have him at number 2 above Salah, but on reflection, if I'm sat there at pick number 2 right now with Salah available, would I really pass over him for Saka? I don't think, if I'm being honest with myself, that I would. But it is very close. I wouldn't argue with anyone that would take Saka at number 2. I think he's an absolutely phenomenal pick. On to pick number 4 then, and we have got Cole Palmer. Per 90 data, absolutely incredible. Points per 90 of 8.37 is ridiculous. A lot of people forget that he didn't even start the season for Chelsea last year and still racked up a ridiculous amount of points. Expected points of 6.55 per 90, so he did overperform a decent amount, and a lot of people will say that's down to the penalties, but actually it's not, because penalties are factored pretty highly in expected points. So obviously a penalty is about 0.9 XG, I think, or 0.85 XG, something around that sort of mark. So racking up loads of penalties actually helps your XG quite a lot. So that does mean that with an XG of just 0.6 per 90 and all the penalties he got, how good is his threat in open play? We'll have to wait and see if Chelsea get the same level as they did last year. Somehow I doubt it. But he's not just a penalty merchant. He is a fantastic player, and I've got no doubt that Chelsea are going to be a little bit stronger this season. I think Maresca is actually, for the first time in quite a while, a manager that I actually trust to sort this mess out a little bit. I fancy Chelsea to do quite well this season. And, you know, the underlying data is good, even though he did overperform his goals and assists. It's still pretty good, 0.6 XG per 90 and 0.28 XA per 90. You know, we're looking at almost 1 XGI per 90, which is strong numbers. So I do think that he's in for another good season, regardless of whether he gets a ton of penalties or not. One thing I like about Palmer is that he always makes the right decision in the final third. He's not as much like Salah that's just going to shoot at every opportunity. He will pass when he needs to, and he will shoot when he needs to. His decision making is absolutely fantastic. So you always feel like when he's in the box, you're going to get something when Chelsea are on the attack, and I think he's a brilliant player to own. I was going to end it there, but there's one more point I haven't made actually. There's no real doubt over his minutes. He is by far and away Chelsea's most important player, and compared to with some of the other players we've got a little bit further down the rankings, there's no risk with him really. He's going to play the vast majority. As of right now, he's got absolutely zero injury history, which we love to see. He doesn't look like the kind of player that's going to be brittle. So yeah, those kind of consistent week-to-week performances are absolutely what you're looking for in a first pick, and I think Cole Palmer ticks basically every single box. On to number 5 then. And the final man on this list, and pick number 5, there were quite a lot of candidates here, but it is of course Phil Foden. Per 90 data is not amazing, but like Saka, he played a load of minutes last season, way more than he has in any of the previous seasons. He was pretty much impervious to rotation. He did miss out a couple of times, but the vast majority he was in the starting lineup, and he was fantastic, especially in the periods where KDB was injured. Per 90 data, we're looking at 7.3 points per 90, which is strong, very strong. I think it's right up there with everyone else on this list. Expected points per 90 of 5.28 is low. It's the lowest out of these 5, but it's not absurdly low. And like I said, he does have security of minutes, you would think. He doesn't have penalties. He's the only man in this top 5 that doesn't have penalties, which does worry me a little bit, and that is why he's just one tier below the other 4. The penalties and the minutes aren't quite as secure, in my opinion, for Phil Foden, although he does seem like he doesn't really get injured, which is definitely a bonus. He has been available pretty much the entire time of his whole career at City, which is definitely good to see. Looking at the expected data, XG of 0.32 per 90 and XA of 0.22 is not that good. It's not poor, it's just not amazing. One thing he does have on his side is that he's got some exceptionally good finishers around him at City, so those expected assists will often be realised, which is a problem you have with players that are very creative in teams where they're the best player by far, is they create a lot of chances because they're so good, but if the players around them aren't very clinical, that expected assist number can get really high, and it's very, very frustrating without realising any of the points. XG of 0.32 is low, but Foden does take a lot of shots from outside the box, and he's very, very good at it. If you give him, a couple of yards on the edge of the box, you're quite often looking at, top left-hand corner, which we saw quite a lot last season. So I'm not too worried about this data, and like I said before, he does play a lot of minutes. There was a little bit of overperformance, but I think the calibre of player he is, he could probably keep that up. So when we look at all these players sort of in one table, you can see here I've got minutes, XG, goals, XA, assists, X points and points. This is all per 90, and I've got the total minutes up the side. So Saka did play the most minutes by quite a distance. Then it was Foden. Haaland, Salah and Palmer all missed stretches of the season. Palmer at the start, Salah during AFCON, and then Haaland when he had that injury. The XG, it is so far and away Haaland's ballpark. 1.04 XG per game is ridiculous, and that converts into a lot of goals, as you can see from this table. Saka is the most creative of the 3. Salah and Palmer are reasonably close behind. Foden actually 4th out of these 5. As I said earlier, the expected data is not that strong from him. You're kind of banking on the minutes and the strength of the team and his just consistent performances. Expected points, Haaland and Salah are miles ahead of the rest, as you'd expect, and it was kind of these sorts of data points that made me think I've just got to go back to Salah. I think, you know, an expected point extra per game is quite a big deal over a season. So I think, you know, as long as he can stay injury free and Liverpool do reasonably well, I think Salah is going to be right up there at the end of the season. And when we look at actual points per 90, obviously Saka, the only one under 7, mainly due to his sort of consistent play over a lot of minutes, as opposed to the other four, who all had little stretches out the team. Okay, so that wraps up my top 5 picks. Thank you all for watching. I'm sure many of you will disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. Let me know in the comments down below what you do differently. As I said at the start, if you want to see the full rankings, check out the Patreon in the link down below. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.